Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you leave a rating and a review. That would mean so much. Now, enjoy the podcast.
Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
But we got a lot to get to. I asked you this question yesterday. I didn't want you to give me the answer yesterday. I think we have to ask the question. And people can text in at 609-403-0973. Josh, Hennig, Hunter Brody filling in for Mays and Eitan here on 97.3 ESPN. 609-403-0973. I think there's a regression for the Eagles offense, just like there is for the Rams offense, just like there is for the Bears offense. Mitchell Trubisky looked good for what, one quarter yesterday, basically? I'm asking, and I'm not saying I'm giving a de facto answer. How much of the problem with these teams, and I'm lumping them all together for a specific reason, Peterson, McVay, Nagy, they're all supposed to be these great offensive minds, right? But all of them have offenses that have seen a downtick in scoring. The Eagles scored 28.6 points per game in 2017. In 2018, they dropped down to 22.9. This year, they're down to 22.1. That means the Eagles' offense is going down every year since the Super Bowl run. And that's not on Wentz. Foles played last year, too. At what point do we got to stop blaming Wentz and say Doug's got to pick up or shut up, too? Well, because I think we all can see the numbers and on the field, these offenses have regressed.
I don't think it's unfair. Like, you need to blame all of them because Carson Wentz still sucked. No matter if Doug Peterson's scheme isn't working, like Carson Wentz missed wide open throws. His receivers weren't getting open. Everyone has blame involved in how everything played out. When you look at the numbers and you look at the coaches you're talking about, this is my answer to that. This league is so damn hard. It's so hard, it's ridiculous. What the Patriots are doing is so mind-blowing that you can't use them as an example. Well, Belichick does this. This is the one thing I love to hear. Tom Brady never had wide receivers. You can't compare Carson Wentz to the best quarterback to ever play in the history of football.
Right, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. So I don't care that Tom Brady does it without wide receivers because he's such a ridiculous athlete that doesn't compare to anybody else in this league. So when you look at every team that wins a Super Bowl, the closest thing to the Patriots was the Seahawks, and they went, back-to-back years one time? Isn't that what happened?
Yep.
So it's just showing you how insanely difficult this league really is. Now, that's not an excuse. Their job is to figure it out, but what those numbers show you is people watch film, people have the film, and once you succeed, they will study your film and figure it out. It's now your turn to adjust, but it's a common thing to kind of regress at times unless you are elite of the elite, and there's not many of those besides Bill Belichick.
But here's the thing. It's not just the Eagles.
That's my point.
Even the Rams are scoring 10 less points per game this year versus last year. You're talking about a Bears team that I don't even know what is going on with Mitch Trubisky halftime. I mean, I didn't think he was going to be an NFL quarterback in the first place, but I didn't expect this. Like a Jekyll and Hyde act. Wentz is obviously having mechanical issues, depending on who you ask. He's missing throws. Goff just looks like a deer in the headlights sometimes. I just wonder, Hunter, if there's a point in time where I'm having trouble figuring, because I always believe that players play and coaches coach. But then I see these numbers, and people are telling me, this guy knows what he's doing. This coach. At what point, because we see what's going on in Dallas, how that coaching staff is literally wasting away an elite roster. Like, you give that roster to almost any other team in the NFL, that team is probably, 9-3 right now?
Yeah, I mean, 8-4 maybe.
Okay, but still,
8-4.
They're at least 2 or 3 games above 500. They're 6-6.
I know, and they're losing home games, and they're losing home games
badly.
losing
games badly. That's the point. At what point is coaching around this league just taking a step back because these coaches are not adjusting enough to teams figuring them out?
Well, I think it's so year to year. Do you remember that Drew Brees went 9-7 a couple years. 7. It was 7-9.
7-9.
7-9, not 9-7. 7-9. Couple years in a row. Sean Payton almost got fired, and then they found a way to turn it around. Harbaugh down in Baltimore almost got fired. Look at him now. So the NFL is so year to year. It's not just teams, it's coaches too. It's everything. That's just reality with this league. It's so year to year. Doug Peterson can bounce back and be 12-4 next year, and everyone looks back at this season and laughs it off. That's just how it works at the end of the day, and you need to have that mentality. Now, once again, it's not an excuse. Doug Peterson gets paid a lot of money to figure this thing out, so he needs to figure this thing out this season. But there are statistics, and it is reality that sometimes you just have a down year. Sometimes you have a great year, and that's just what it is. It doesn't mean you're a bad coach or not. Sometimes the injuries play a factor. Sometimes drafting poorly, like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, plays a factor, because any of these other guys in the second round would be very beneficial to this team right now, and we picked a guy who can't even understand a playbook.
Yeah, well, the playbook issue, that's a player issue.
It is. But you mentioned coaches coach, players play. I agree with that in every sport. But for football, I think that there is way more intense. The coaching is way more intense than other ones in football because of the play calling, the schemes, the personnel, the way that they attack the game and they call the game. It's different than, say, basketball, hockey, and things like that. So for football, it is more of a combined team thing than any other sport.
Yeah. 609-403-0970. We do have a texter who texted in and said, that was a great Bills win. It made my Thanksgiving that much better because my brother-in-law and my nephews are all Cowboy fans.
It's funny how much we take pride in that loss. It made Thanksgiving that much better.
Well, you have to, because now the Eagles go to Miami. They're basically in tied for the division lead. And when the Eagles' schedule the rest of the year is 14-41, things are looking up. Yeah, you had a rough stretch. You lost to the Patriots with, as we just mentioned, the best coach and quarterback in the league. And then you lose to the Seahawks, who have an MVP candidate in Russell Wilson, on a day when you didn't have Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks didn't play, so you lost basically your whole half of your right side of your line. Dillard played poorly, and let's be frank, Doug has had 2 bad play calling games. But you're still in it. And hope springs eternal. So yeah, that's what makes Thanksgiving better, because it's not just Cowboys loss. It's that you see the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Redskins almost every week for the rest of the year. You win all those games, you're probably winning the division.
Definitely, and I understand why fans are going big picture right now, looking at the future. Oh, the only game that matters is the Cowboys game at this point, because Eagles fans are writing off the rest of the way. I'm just not there yet, because I haven't seen this team look good offensively. So maybe if they dominate and look great offensively against the Dolphins, and then they do it again on the Monday night game, and I will gradually feel better based off of beating down on these bad opponents. But right now, with where I stand, I just need to take it 1 week at a time, because this is football. I've seen Atlanta go into New Orleans and beat the Saints. I've seen crazy things happen where the Kansas City Chiefs lose. How about Green Bay losing to the Chargers? There are so many things that happen in this league. Why can't the Giants beat the Eagles in one of these games? They can, right? I mean, they can.
They can,
right.
Yes. I just think the odds are less likely, because the difference between the Chargers and the Giants is the Chargers actually have a good coach. The Chargers actually have a future Hall of Famer quarterback.
But
probably.
he stinks this year. He stinks.
You would rather take him than Daniel Jones, though.
Definitely, but it's not. There's not much of a difference with the way Philip Rivers is playing.
I think if you line up position group by position group, outside of Saquon Barkley, the Chargers have a definitive advantage at every position on the field.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but before that game started, we would all agree that we thought Green Bay would pretty much win that football game.
Most people will assume that, yeah.
Right. My point is, to just assume they're going to run the table after watching them go 5-6 so far this season, I can't personally do that. Will I gradually feel more confident as they put together wins against these crappier opponents? Sure, probably, but I can't just assume they're going to win out at this very moment.
I think that with the Eagles, before we get back to the text, I think that when you look at this team, though, I think it's becoming more apparent, and this is something that you and I have talked about before, the fact that the Eagles didn't acquire Jalen Ramsey. They didn't acquire Marcus Peters. They didn't acquire fill-in-the-blank defensive player. I think it's becoming more and more obvious the defense is not the problem for this team.
Absolutely, and this was something that I wanted to bring up. Jalen Ramsey, when he was available, this city went ballistic, freaking out, Howie, how can you not go after him? That was the right decision, and I believed that it was, listen, would I have done it? I might have would have done it for 2 firsts. I don't. He's still young, and you can build with him, and you wouldn't have to worry about a corner. We still need to worry about corners in the future. So he still would have helped this team down the road. But knowing how many holes are with this team, you can take a step back now. Look at what the Rams are doing. Looking at the effort he put in last week. 2 firsts and a 4th, I'm not crying about the Jalen Ramsey trade anymore. It seemed to be the right move by Howie to not go out and get him. It was an overreaction to a big name at the time with the outrage. You can look back now and say, wow, thank God we didn't trade 2 first-rounders because we need those picks to build this thing back up.
And it might not be specifically drafting those picks. It may be acquiring someone. And I think you saw last night the Falcons-Saints game. No Julio Jones. It impacted the offense. Matt Ryan, with a couple of his offensive linemen, impacted that offense. And I think that there's a lot of parallels between what the Falcons' offense can do at their peak to the Eagles' offense at their peak. I think that you see now on other teams, because I get it. Eagle fans not consistently watching the rest of the NFL all the time. You got a life. You got a job. Maybe you got a family. Maybe you got 2 jobs, 3 jobs.
Are those things more important than football, Josh?
Well, for some people it is. I'm not judging people. Look, if you're a diehard Eagles, Sixer, Flyer fan, Philly fan, maybe you're only watching your team the majority of the time. So that's why a game like last night was on national TV and everyone gets to see it. Matt Ryan is a league MVP. Took his team to the Super Bowl. First-round pick. But you saw what happened without his number 1 receiver and missing an offensive lineman. He kind of looked like Carson Wentz, didn't he?
Yeah, he's having a tough go this year.
Right? So, I mean, there's a point in time where I think that when you look at those picks that you saved, by not acquiring Clowney, Ramsey, and these other guys.
Clowney went for a 3rd and a 5th, I believe it was. Now, that one should have been targeted now as you take a step back.
Maybe not.
Maybe. That one, because it's not a monstrous package.
I remind you that Deshaun Jackson was not a first-round pick.
Yeah, but when you look at the 3rd to the 5th round picks for Howie have been brutal.
That's not true.
Besides Rasul Douglas.
Sayamalu.
He's really not that good. He's serviceable.
He's a solid, good NFL left guard.
Serviceable.
And frankly, and I'm gonna tick off the lovers out there of this guy. But how much are you gonna tell me that it was Joe Douglas versus Tyler Rose with those picks last few years?
Well, now we're really gonna see.
I heard a million times Joe Douglas is the reason why. Right? I had to hear that a million times from everyone. Joe Douglas, not Howie Roseman. Well, guess what? Those picks that you're talking about, Hunter, Pumphrey, for example, Sidney Jones, fill in the blank.
Maybe even J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at this point.
Howie, I don't know how much of that was Joe Douglas versus Howie Roseman. And furthermore, I don't know how much of that was Andy Weidel, who is now the new Joe Douglas, was him telling Joe something and then them going together to Howie, telling Howie to draft somebody. We don't know. And by the way, people forget that Howie didn't draft Nelson Aguilar. That was a Chip Kelly move.
Right.
So you can't blame all the first round issues or questions on Howie.
Now the Clowney trade was Seahawks traded a 3rd round pick and a pass rusher, Mingo. And a defensive end,
right?
Jacob Martin. So there was no 5th involved. There was a 3rd and 2 players,
right? And let's remember that Mingo and Martin were specific fits for the Texans' defensive scheme.
But let's be real, Clowney is worth a 3rd round pick.
He's worth a 3rd round. But did the Eagles have players to send to Houston that they wanted?
Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe Houston looked at Mingo and said, because Mingo basically plays the same position as Clowney in that defense. Obviously, he's not as good as Clowney. I'm not saying they're one and the same, but sometimes you're looking for a replacement player in a trade. Sometimes, and you know this as a hockey guy, okay? How many times do you see players get swapped for each other, and it's almost like an exchange of equal pieces, but two guys who, one guy may be a little bit better than the other guy, but they play the same position. And I think that's part of what happened with the Houston-Seattle trade. I think a lot of that had to do with Houston saying, we just want value in return because this guy doesn't want to be here.
Let me ask you this, because now that we're talking about this position specifically, are you underwhelmed with Derek Barnett? What do you think of Derek Barnett? This was a first-round pick. I don't think he's awful by any means, but would you expect at this point of his career a little bit more production than what he's giving you, especially with someone like Fletcher Cox, who creates controversy for the opposing offensive line? You would think that he would have more production than he does. I'm not saying he stinks, but did we expect more out of a first-round pick?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I would ask you, do you factor in that he missed half of last year at all into his development?
I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of this season.
Okay, so you're not factoring in where he is in the development tree.
Correct. Well, I mean, how many years has it been? This is his third season now?
This is his third season. He missed half of last year.
I still think I expect more than I'm getting at this point.
Okay. My second question would be, do you know how much he's actually playing?
Well, if he's not playing enough, then that's also an issue. Okay. Why can't he get on the field?
Well, what I'm saying is that he right now is third on the team in percentage of snaps played. So is it maybe they're playing him maybe too much? Or do you think it shouldn't matter?
I think the number you gave me should be about right.
Okay.
I think that's probably about right.
Because him and Graham are on the field about the same amount.
Exactly. I was just about to relate him to Brandon Graham. And Brandon Graham is playing really well. He's having a solid season. He's playing better than I expected him to at his age. I was under the impression of, it's time to move on. Thank you very much, Brandon Graham. And you know what? Maybe down the line, that contract will come back to bite us a little bit. But for right now, he's playing very well. Derek Barnett is just underwhelming me for a first-round pick. I don't hear his name enough. It's not about sacks. I get that. I just don't think that he's contributing enough for my liking at this point.
Okay, so you feel like he's not having as much of an impact on the game as he should.
Correct. That doesn't mean he's not having any impact, because I believe he is having impact. Just not as much as I expected him to.
No, I'm just trying to clarify where you're going with this, because I think that the thing for me with Barnett is I think that he's a year behind because of that injury. I think last year was supposed to be this year for him. But because of the injury, he lost time. And remember, who knows how healthy he is coming off that injury. So I think that you need to wait a year before making that assessment with him. I think because he still has some sacks, he still has tackles for loss, he's playing a lot of snaps. I think it's going to benefit him next year because he's going to have all this service time under his belt. He's going to be a much better player next year than he was, than he's showing you at times this year. Because guess what? He has 3.5 sacks, 12 QB hits, and 5 tackles for loss. So it's not like he's not doing anything out there.
Sure, and that's what I was saying. I'm not making it seem like he stinks and can't play and he's not doing enough. Well, maybe that back part was kind of what I'm going with.
No, I think you feel like you look at Barnett and where he was drafted and how the team looks at him, and you're saying this guy should be more.
I mean, he was compared to Reggie White coming out of the draft, was he not?
Which was stupid.
Yeah, I never use the argument of what other people relate him to and what other people compare him to, because that's laughable.
Look, the only reason why he was compared to Reggie because he broke Reggie's record at Tennessee.
Right.
When they're totally different players. You know, Barnett is much more of a freak athlete, whereas Reggie was a physical monster with incredible bursts and technique. Reggie had some of the best hand fighting you ever saw in the NFL. And he also happened to have that crazy burst. He could literally beat a tackle off the snap because he was just that much quicker. Barnett's got that crazy bend that people have trouble blocking. And unless you're a elite NFL offensive lineman, you have trouble if Barnett gets the edge on you.
Now, I'm on Pro Football Reference right now, looking up some of Derek Barnett's stats and whatnot. They have nicknames on there. Did you know that the Derek Barnett nickname is either, there's two, The Savage or Boy Wonder? I haven't heard those nicknames called out one time since he's been here.
All right, so I have a theory on the Pro Football Reference nickname thing.
Okay, hit me.
Because if you notice, all the reference sites have nickname. Like, so-and-so's nickname is this. So my working theory is that those nicknames are asked of the player, and they're not asked of anybody else. It's like, if I went to you, Hunter, and said, what do people call you?
Well, my answer would be Broads.
But that might be different than if I asked one of the guys you played hockey with.
Well, it wouldn't be, but I get your point.
Like, I think that Barnett might be saying in an interview, people call me this. But then if you go ask, like, his brother or, like, his buddy from high school, it might be a different name.
Right.
Because I feel like some of these names on these reference, whether it's baseball, pro reference, basketball reference, I look at these names and I think, nobody calls you that.
No one calls Derek Barnett the Savage
Or Wonder Boy.
Boy Wonder, Josh.
Boy Wonder.
Let's
sorry.
let's not mix this thing up.
Mike Gill has a day off. Ryan Rothstein is taking a day off. Jeff Mosher, I believe, is still in Jamaica. So we're here instead, hanging out with you.
I'd rather be here than Jamaica. You know what I'm saying?
I think Jamaica's a little overrated.
I've never been, and of course,
I've never been either, but I'm just saying. Like, I feel like if I'm going to go to an island paradise, I feel like there's a lot of other islands.
So my girlfriend and I took a trip last December. If you had to take a wild guess on where I would go in the middle of December, do you have any guess?
Can you give me the part of the world?
Calgary, Alberta.
Oh, well, that's just you, yeah.
So apparently next time she gets to choose, and it'll be somewhere tropical.
Well, I mean, you got so many places out there. I mean, you got the Bahamas, you got Puerto Rico, you got St. Thomas, Bermuda.
Yeah, there's so many great places.
There's so many
there.
places. I mean, I feel like Jamaica is like that commercial that you see often. That's the only reason why you even know it's a vacation destination.
But see, I like the freezing cold. I like the snow. I like the mountains. I'm not even a big snowboarder or skier, but I really enjoy that type of
Because you're a
scenery.
hockey player.
I mean, man, it's crazy. You should see some of these videos I have on the frozen pond out there
Nobody
in Alberta.
cares.
Stop. You're kidding. I'll show you these pictures, and you're going to say, damn, that's beautiful.
I know it's beautiful. I've seen mountain ranges before.
Nah, not like this. Not skating on the pond. The frozen pond, you know?
Okay. No, I don't know, actually. Like, I'm not a good skater. But thanks for asking. We've been talking a lot of NFL the last hour and change. Again, 609-403-0973. Eagles play this Sunday. Hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN as the Eagles take on the Dolphins. Coverage begins at Billy Schweim in the locker room at 8 a.m., which Hunter Brody is the producer of on Sunday. Then from 10 to noon is Tony Bruno's kind of the kickoff. Thank God Tony Bruno is back in the saddle, that he's doing well. Get a little worried about him. I mean, the guy had like 3-4 surgeries in the last few months.
Seems like he's doing well, though.
Yeah, he's doing better.
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
happy. I'm happy about that.
Absolutely.
I am thankful the day after Thanksgiving that Tony Bruno is fine.
Me
How about
too.
that?
Me too.
I am not thankful for Schwein being unable to reply a full text back to me though yesterday.
What happened?
Well, I wish everybody, you mentioned the last hour, I sent everybody my Thanksgiving greeting.
Absolutely.
This year it was, hope you have a Marvel-us Thanksgiving. It was a picture of all these Marvel characters at Thanksgiving dinner. So I sent it to Billy, and I'll read you the exact text back. Because this is so Billy.
As you do that, I'm trying to pull up this Rangers Bruins stream because I went Rangers plus 205 in the TD Garden.
Of course you did.
Got to make sure I tune in here.
So I sent it to Schwein, the same thing I sent you that you mentioned earlier. He says, Josh, have a great, and that's it.
Well, see, I don't think that's Billy doing anything other than
Being Billy.
failing with technology.
Yeah, that's just Billy being Billy. I know Billy meant to say, Josh, have a great Thanksgiving. I'll see you Saturday. But I know Billy. And I know Billy probably started writing the text, got frustrated, didn't realize he hit send, and then probably thought, Josh knows what I meant.
That's exactly what happened. But let's get to this Carson Wentz text, because I thought it was great.
This is the text of the day so far. Like, if there was an award for text of the day, which I don't know if we have the power to give out that award, but I'm going to give it out anyway. The texter says, when the Cleveland Browns traded their pick to the Eagles for the Birds to draft Wentz, the GM of the Browns, who by the way is not there anymore, said that they evaluated Wentz and have him as an average quarterback. Could they have been right?
Are we going to trust the Cleveland Browns organization on evaluating talent, number one?
No.
Okay. Number two, I think it's fair to say that Carson Wentz is not elite because to me, elite is Aaron Rodgers, and even Aaron Rodgers struggled. We watched him struggle in San Francisco. So
Tom Brady's elite, but he's struggling this year.
Absolutely. Drew Brees and Mahomes. So there's four guys that I would put in the elite category. There's guys close to it. I know Deshaun Watson has been fantastic. Lamar Jackson's having
but they're tier two.
Right, he's having an MVP-type season, but I can't put him in elite. Carson Wentz doesn't need to be elite. If he's an above-average quarterback, the Eagles are in a good position.
You and I talked about the tiered quarterback. I think it was back in August, before the season began, and they had Wentz in the third tier, but the top of the third tier with Matt Ryan. And I said at the time that I thought that the Wentz-Matt Ryan comparison was accurate because look at Matt Ryan last night. Matt Ryan was missing an offensive lineman. He was missing his number one receiver. He was missing his backup running back, and the team struggled. And the kicker missed multiple kicks, and they still had a chance to win it. I think that Matt Ryan and Wentz are very similar. Can Wentz win an MVP like Ryan? Yes. Can Wentz lead a team in the Super Bowl like Ryan did? Yes. But he is not an elite quarterback. And I don't think that's a horrible thing. I don't think he's an average quarterback, though, because to me, what is an average quarterback in the NFL? Alex Smith.
Okay. I was trying to think when you said that. Alex Smith, average, or would you say below average?
No, he's average to above average because he's a guy who gets you to the playoffs. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, but he's not elite. He's not the reason why you win every game. But when he was in a Kansas City offense that had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill and Kareem Hunt, he had 4,000 passing yards, right? To me, an average quarterback is Ryan Tannehill. He
might be a little below average, though.
No, but think about it. Tannehill, what did he do? He threw for 4,000 passing yards one year.
But there are so many.
He led a team to the playoffs.
There's so many bad quarterbacks that the average is still bad, in my opinion, in some situations. You know what I'm saying? Because if you look at all of the quarterbacks and you look at the embarrassing ones that shouldn't even be on a roster at one end, and then you have the Tom Brady at the other, the middle. It doesn't mean you can be technically an average quarterback, but still be bad. To me, that would be Ryan Tannehill.
Okay, look, I look at it like this. To me, guys like Tannehill and Alex Smith are kind of similar.
What about Andy Dalton? I'm looking at some lists.
Andy Dalton's below average.
Case Keenum.
Case Keenum is below average.
See, I put Tannehill in that category with those guys.
I put him ahead of those guys.
But does it matter? If Tannehill or any of these guys are your franchise quarterback, let's start over.
My point is that I don't think Wentz is average.
Agreed. I'm on the same page.
I think Wentz is above those guys. I think Wentz is above the Daltons, the Tannehills, the Alex Smith.
Absolutely.
The Case Keenum, Kyle Allen in Carolina.
Let me ask you this. If you had, and I believe that this guy's success, or I guess you would say his failures, are based off of the organization. So let me ask you this. If we had, and saying we as the Eagles, Matthew Stafford for 12, 13, 14 years as your quarterback, how do you feel about that? Let me ask you that question.
I think can I take that to another level?
Yes.
Swap out Matthew Stafford's career with Donovan McNabb. Do you think the Eagles would have gotten the one more Super Bowl with Stafford versus McNabb?
I don't know. I mean, it would have changed everything. I was going to say I don't know because they play two totally different styles. Like McNabb was way more mobile and he had a different type of game.
They've been injured about the same amount of times.
Injury-wise, maybe. But I'm trying to picture
Stafford has the bigger arm.
How that
McNabb is more noble.
Right. I'm trying to think on how that offense would
Andy Reid is still the coach.
Would have been able to move with Stafford in the pocket compared to
Stafford's
what McNabb
arm
did.
is closer to Mahomes than McNabb's. Just
Definitely.
arm talent.
Definitely.
Not cerebrally. Like Mahomes is cerebrally on another level. But Matthew Stafford has elite ability. And we saw what Andy Reid did in that 1 year with Michael Vick. He got the most out of Vick.
I think to answer your question, I think we'd be in the same category. I don't know if
Okay.
Matthew Stafford would have won it, but it would have been something similar to what Donovan McNabb brought.
Okay, so and then I ask you this. Is 10 years of McNabb going to be better or the same as Wentz?
It's probably going to be in the same category.
Okay, so if it's going to be in the same category, that means Wentz was worth your pick.
Absolutely, and I agree. It's as if some of the fans believe if you don't have an elite quarterback, it's time to start over. And
But
that's
guess
such
what?
a wrong mindset.
There's only 5 elite quarterbacks.
I know. If not less, you can't just start
And
over.
you mentioned in the last hour that Drew Brees he was going 7-9, 8-8, 7-9.
Yeah, in multiple years in a
Rodney
row.
Harrison said on the television broadcast, did you hear him on the broadcast last night? He said, I played with Drew Brees in San Diego. I liked him. He was a hard worker, but I never thought he'd be this. There's something to be said for a guy early in his career. We don't 100% know what he's going to become. But it's a great question to ask because there had to be a reason why the Browns passed on Wentz aside from just they thought he'd be an average quarterback. And I think, and this is my belief, this is my theory based on this texter's question, because he did follow up with another question. We'll get to that in just a second. He said, thank you, though, for the text of the day honors. You're welcome, texter. It's a great question. I think there is something to be said for the fact that the Browns thought their franchise, because Jimmy Haslam's been the owner for a little while now, they thought that they could draft Deshaun Kaiser and Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel, but not Carson Wentz. Because what do all 3 of those quarterbacks have in common that I just mentioned, aside from being drafted by the Browns?
They can move a little bit.
So can Wentz.
Right. Well, I guess you're right.
There's nothing else.
What are you going to point out?
They all played D1 football.
Okay.
I think that the Wentz playing at the FCS level scared some teams. I genuinely believe that the fact that Wentz got injured his senior year, the fact that he played at a lower level of football, they consider it, even though there is a history of NFL quarterbacks being successful from the FCS, like Phil Simms and Steve McNair, who were good, but not elite quarterbacks. They were both very good quarterbacks. You know, some people argue that Phil Simms should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. I don't feel that strongly about it, but that's not here or there. We have seen good NFL quarterbacks lead teams in Super Bowls from the FCS, but maybe the Browns looked at where he was coming from and said, there's a ceiling on that kind of player. And maybe, Hunter, there is a ceiling for Wentz. Maybe his potential is not limitless, like a Mahomes or a Watson. Maybe Wentz is a guy who he is going to hit his ceiling, and that's all he'll ever be. And maybe all he'll ever be is Matt Ryan. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I'm on the same exact page as you. I think there's just an overreaction to him not succeeding this season so far, and it has been ugly at times, and the whole Nick Foles thing is thrown out there without a doubt, and I get that. But we've seen him play at the MVP level before, so we know that there's something in there. There's something in there, and as much as we want to bring it all on the quarterback, this is a team game, and that's not a cop-out. It is a reality that wide receivers need to make plays. There were plenty of throws, and not last night against the Bills, but I've seen Amari Cooper, I've seen Gallup make toe-tapping catches when the ball's thrown 7 yards out of bounds and they make a play for their quarterback. We haven't seen anything even close to that once this season. It is a team game. There needs to be a way to hold everyone accountable. I know that it falls more on the quarterback, and then people like to bring up the fact that he's getting paid all this money, so he needs to deliver. He needs to make people step up. I always bring it back to Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers does have these receivers that no one ever heard of step up at times, but when was the last time Aaron Rodgers was in the Super Bowl? It's been quite some time,
9
right?
years.
9 years. And then people say, well, he's been injured. well, then that even helps Carson Wentz's argument even more. It's so difficult in this league. You need a full team to go out there and produce to win Super Bowls. Aaron Rodgers is fantastic. He makes his wide receivers step up a little bit, but I've seen him struggle so much as well, so much also. So it's you can look around the league and see it's not just Wentz who struggles when his wide receivers are not there.
The texter's follow-up question is, where does Wentz fall in the NFL 32 quarterback ranking for you guys?
I think I need to actually make a list. I don't want to just get thrown into it.
I will say this. I don't think Wentz is a top 10 quarterback right now.
I think during the break, I can put something together where we can come out on the other side and maybe discuss this further.
We will come back on this, but you did say something that was interesting. The money. The money he's getting paid. Can I list you a couple other players who are getting paid a lot of money?
Yes.
In Philadelphia? Claude Giroux.
Oh, don't even get me started on this. Me and Billy Schweim almost got into a fist fight over the Claude Giroux debate.
Ben Simmons. And Aaron Nola got an extension this year too, did he not? You have 4 guys who are all playing on extensions right now. Is it fair to say that the Philadelphia fan is frustrated with Wentz because they look at the other 3 teams and they're frustrated with their stars too?
Definitely. I think that's fair. The one thing, going back to just football real quick in that contract, everyone who signs the next contract is the next highest paid quarterback.
Right. It used to be Derek Carr. It used to be Matthew Stafford.
It's based off of the league making that much money and the salary cap going up. It's not based off of the individual talent.
And by the way, I can say the same thing about the other guys. Ben Simmons got his contract because that's what the league is running at this point.
Correct.
Claude Giroux got paid what he's getting. That's what other captains on other teams get paid at this point. Right?
I really want to get into Claude Giroux, but I'll let that sit for a little.
But you understand what I'm saying.
Yes,
There's something
I do.
to be said with the fact that it's not just the money. It's the fact that these guys are getting paid market value. You are worth as much as someone's willing to pay you. And if someone is willing to call you up and say, I want to give you Bryce Harper money, what are you going to say? No.
Right.
The Eagles are paying Carson Wentz because they offered him the money. What was Wentz supposed to say? I think I'll take less money.
Well,
No.
there are people who think that we did it too fast, too early, but that's not true because what you're saying is, well, if he had a bad season, we're going to let him walk then and not re-sign him or trade him. That's not an option. That would never happen. So it was the right time to sign him.
When Dak signs his contract, and then Pat Mahomes signs his next contract, and then Deshaun Watson signs his contract, the Wentz deal is going to look like nothing.
It blows my mind that it goes that heavy. Well, he's making that much money. He needs to make everyone better. I understand the logic where the quarterback is supposed to make everyone rise and he's supposed to be the leader, and I'm not taking that away from anyone. That is the truth. That is their job. It is a tough position to play, and only so many people can deliver with that type of personality and be the one that everyone looks at and says he's going to lead us to a victory this Sunday. But there's a lot that goes into it as well. And to think it just comes down to the money, I don't know. So many people are signing for big bucks. I think the money part of it is the farthest issue from the problem, that he is getting paid that much money. He has to do it.
Text board is open at 609-403-0970. Come up at 12 minutes. We'll step it up, take a risk. Harry Mays and Eitan Shannon will join us from locations unknown that we may learn what they are coming up at 12 minutes. Because, look, it's their segment, and they want to be part of it, even though I'm the one making the picks. So, that's okay, right?
Absolutely. As long as you win money.
If anybody cares, Texas and Texas Tech are tied 14-all right now in the second quarter because I've got college football in the studio because I'm that guy.
Over college basketball. You said you're college basketballed out, which makes no sense to me.
Because you called me out on the air, and I got to explain myself. All right? Here's the deal. As a consumer of television and sports, you have to make choices. There's all kinds of things to watch. So for me, my consumption is based on the peak of the sport that is in play. Football is only around for about 5-6 months. So football most of the time is going to take a priority because I only get it for so much of the year.
But not a 4-7 Texas Tech team versus Texas, who's about 500.
Because this will probably be the last time I see Texas play for their bowl game.
But who cares about their bowl game? They don't move the needle for me. You're talking about some of the college basketball not moving the needle. It's fresh. It's new. I've been anticipating Duke. I've been anticipating Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans.
I've seen Michigan State and Duke 3 times now, I feel like.
You
or
can
2 times.
Yeah, but you can't get enough of them right now. It's still so fresh.
But it's not that high on the pecking order.
But it's
as a consumer for me, it's football is number 1 right now. And then if I have to go number 2, it's probably the NBA.
We're deep into the football
season. And then
season.
number 3, it's probably the Flyers. College basketball is behind all 3 of those things.
Wow, the Flyers are that high, huh?
The Flyers are higher than college basketball.
Flyer
yes.
die, huh? Hashtag Flyer die. You're flyered up.
Look, I love watching Carter Hart. If Carter Hart is starting in goal, I'm watching the television.
Well, I'll tell you what. The Moose has been playing very well, so do not disrespect the Moose.
I will disrespect the
Why?
Moose.
He's playing so
He's
good.
not appointment television viewing.
I care about getting 2 points on the road. I don't care about what you're entertained with.
I see Brian Elliott on the ice starting a game, I am not going to put the Flyers at the top of my television viewing tier that night.
You are disrespecting Moose.
I am. I don't care.
He's playing so well.
I don't care.
I can't believe we're breaking down Moose right now.
Because at
he's
some point, he's going to do what he did about a few weeks ago and choke the game away, because at the end of the day, he's only going to be an above-average goalie.
And if you have an above-average goalie as your backup, then you're in a good spot.
Yeah, but I think he plays too much.
See, that's what the non-hockey fans believe right now, because they've been hearing Carter Hart. Not saying you're not a hockey fan, but I've been around the game, the atmosphere, the locker room more.
I respect your opinion because you played the game.
There is value, so much value in what Brian Elliott's doing right now. The casual fan that is just watching the team from a farther standpoint just doesn't see Carter Hart in that, and that infuriates them because he's supposed to be the promised land.
Because, you know why? When I was younger, when I was your age, no, I'm not that old, but look, when I was younger, Brodeur played almost every night.
But
and Waugh played almost every night. And Hasek played almost every night. And Ed Belfour played almost every night. Mike Richter played almost every night.
This is load management.
John Van Beesbrook played almost every night. Remember the Florida Panthers were a dominant team for a 2-year period with him and Pavel Bure. You want to talk hockey? I can dig into hockey with you right here, okay? We're halfway through to where we are going, which is Flyers hockey at 4 o'clock, and then Sixers at 7:30 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is still open at 609-403-0973. We also got Thomas Hummers Point. We'll get to him in just a few minutes. We got to set up a table first, though, for what we got going on the rest of the show, Hunter. The abbreviated sports basher, John McMullen, is going to join us at 2:30 today. John was at the Peterson press conference this morning. Eagles had practice earlier today. The locker room is just getting done right now, so we're getting John fresh out of the locker room at 2:30 for his football at 4 at 2:30 today. And then Keith Smith will talk some NBA with us coming up at 3:15. He usually joins the Sports Bash every Wednesday at 5:15, but he couldn't join this week because we were so jammed up with all the football stuff on Wednesday that he obliged to come on today at 3:15. So we'll touch on some NBA and Sixers with him as well at 3:15. Again, the text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation. Also, Hunter and I are kind of working, well, we started working on a list of quarterbacks, but we kind of decided to change it up to make it more of a who would you rather have, and then that would help us make our list. So we'll get to that probably a little bit later this hour as well. Also want to remind everyone on 97.3 ESPN to stay tuned all weekend long. Flyers coming up at 4 o'clock. Sixers tonight at 7:30. Tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. Pete Thompson show from 8 to 10 a.m. Billy Schreiber in the locker room from 10 a.m. to noon. And then Cedar Creek versus Camden. The championship game tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN. And then following that will be Nick Costco's college football countdown to the kickoff. And then Rutgers takes on Penn State at 3:30. All part of the lineup along with the Sixers tomorrow night as well. So we got Sixers on back-to-back days. Sixers versus the Knicks tonight, Sixers versus the Pacers tomorrow. All here on 97.3 ESPN. I think I covered everything, right?
You did. And with tonight and the Sixers, you actually have some resting going on. Al Horford not playing. He will be rested. I don't think Josh Richardson is a go. I saw that Ben Simmons is probable, but he had some sort of upper respiratory problem going on.
I feel like it's that time of year where like all these guys start getting sick again. I feel like every year the Sixers have some sort of like bug or flu that
It's
goes to the locker
ridiculous.
room.
Now, is this every NBA team, or we're just seeing this and focus on it because it's the Sixers?
This is every NBA team. Every year there's a handful of teams that have like half their team get sick. Like a couple years ago, I remember when Porzingis was on the Knicks. It was like him and Carmelo and like half the team got sick with a virus. There was a stomach bug, remember, for the Sixers last year. I think it was the Lakers.
Speaking of Melo, though,
Had a flu as well.
he's having a nice little how do you do back in the NBA.
Melo is very interesting because it'll be, how long is it going to last? Not him on the Blazers, but the scoring production. At some point, he's going to have to hit a slump because he hasn't played in almost 2 years.
Well, I don't think that that's fair to say. Why can't he continue this? He was always a good scorer, not so much a great all-around player, but he was always a good scorer.
During his time in Oklahoma City and the short stint he had with Houston, he went through these spells where he couldn't hit a shot.
I think if it's so hard to tell what type of player you are when you're playing next to James Harden because the guy just plays isolation basketball the entire time. That's not the way Melo plays.
Melo's an ISO guy.
But that's my point. You're putting an ISO guy next to an ISO guy. Well, someone's not going to have the ball, so he's not going to be able to do what he does. You know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, but I think the best thing that happened to Melo was him not playing basketball for a while.
Definitely. He re-sparked his energy towards the game, his love for the game, and he accepted a different role,
Right.
too.
I think he needed a reality check. I think he needed to realize that, dude, I'm old now. Like I'm not in the prime of my career. I'm not a superstar in this league anymore. Not that he has been, but he's at a lesser level. He can still be productive.
I'll take him over Furkan Korkmaz coming off the bench for 20 minutes a night. No, I would. I mean, why wouldn't you? Furkan Korkmaz can't play D, and he stinks.
Melo
Can't play D, but he's at least a veteran player who can put up more points and production than Furky Korkmaz.
I don't know.
I'm anti-Furkan, so.
I see that.
Yeah,
I'm
big time. He stinks.
Melo plays a different position, too, though.
Very true. Very true.
Furkan's more of a guard / small forward. Melo at this point is like a stretch 4.
Matisse needs to be playing more minutes than Furkan Korkmaz.
I will roll with that.
That's where we're at here.
I want to see more Thibault than I want to see Furkan. I'll give you that. I can work with you there.
And I'm a Brett guy, but he sees something in Furkan, whether he's trying to grow the bomber or whatever he's trying to do.
Yeah, whatever it is.
I know. It's just so obvious, though. Matisse needs to get more run.
He does. Absolutely. 609-573-3776. We promised Tom at Summers Point we'd crank him up here. Tom, what's going on?
Hey, fake Flyers fan you are. You only watch them when Hart's playing. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard you say.
I didn't say I don't watch. I said it's not as high on the priority list.
No, you didn't.
I said that if I see
you only watch when Hart's playing.
Tom, I said if Brian Elliott is in goal, the Flyers are not very high on the priority list because I want to see Carter Hart. I don't want to see an old goaltender who I know is going to let through a loose goal at some point.
Carter Hart lets up loose goals too, by the way, just throwing it out there.
But he's more interesting. He's more exciting. He's the future of this organization.
All right, let's take a poll. Who heard you say you're not watching the Flyers unless Hart's playing? Let's forget the Flyers. Do you realize Sunday we're one win away from tied for first place for the NFC East?
I opened the 12 o'clock hour with that, yes.
But everybody's jumping off the wagon. Wentz is a bust. Get rid of Wentz. Let's bring Foles back. First of all, Foles is about to get benched in Jacksonville.
That is true.
Number two, I don't care who was quarterbacking his team. They're not winning those games. Johnny Unitas, anybody. Steve Young, Montana. Look at the weapons we had. They're garbage. We're getting healthy. The defense is better. Buckle your seatbelt. We're in for a ride, folks. This is going to be fun to watch.
Tom, I mentioned it earlier in the show. I want to bring this up to you before I let you go. The Eagles' remaining schedule opponents are 14-41 combined.
But it doesn't matter. Cowboys can't beat a team with a winning record. They're
Right, which means by the time they play the Eagles, they'll have a winning record too.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. So, exactly. Listen, everybody's jumping off the wagon. Wentz is a bust. Based on what? You got to look at his body of work. He needs weapons.
Well,
He'll be fine. I'd rather
but Tom,
have him
you
than
know
Derek
what the
Carr. I'd rather
problem.
have him-
Tom, you know what the problem is. You've been to Eagles games. You've been at the bar with people. You hear it all the time. You either have the person who says, well, he's not Nick Foles, or you have the person who says he was the second overall pick, he should be better. People have these unrealistic expectations of a guy on a team that played without his two starting right side of the line players on Sunday.
Yes. I don't know what people watch. They're like, he's a bust. For somebody to say that he's a bust and bring Foles back, you should have your football card. I mean, it's ludicrous.
Tom, I got two busts on my TV right now. I got Brady Quinn and Matt Leinart commentating on college football. Those guys are busts.
Yes. All right, folks.
Tom, you got a prediction for me for Sunday? You got a prediction?
Yeah. 35-10.
Wow, 35 points for the Birds.
Listen, this offense is going to. You watch. Listen, Doug's got to step up. Doug's got to help Wentz out. But we're heading in the right directions. You don't want to be. You want to be playing your best football at the end of the year, which we're going to be doing. I don't. Nobody scares me out there.
Hey, Tom, good to hear from you.
You got it, pal.
Take care of yourself. That's Tom from Summers Point. See, Tom, every time I talk to him every week, he likes to give me a prediction off the air. Even if he doesn't get on the show, he likes to tell me, yo, this is my prediction off the air. So I had to get it on the air from him this time, Hunter.
That's good work by you. Now, one thing he mentioned that I thought was interesting was the football card needs to get pulled from some people for what they think about Carson Wentz. I don't think he was harsh enough on Carson, but I understand his mindset. He was not good. He was not good last game. It's okay to be critical of him and expect more from him, just like I stated about Derek Barnett. We expect more from Derek Barnett. Well, we expect more from Carson Wentz too, but you do need to factor in that his wide receivers are not performing at a high level. His coach is not calling the best game and coming up with the best scheme. So it can be both, but you can't give Carson a free pass either. He is allowed to get criticized, and he deserves to be criticized because he did miss wide-open throws as well.
609-403-0973 is text board. Josh Hennig, Hunter Brody filling in on the Sports Bash for Mike Gill. Even though Mike Gill is standing right here in the studio, he stopped by to say hello. How you doing, Mike? Gives me the thumbs up. I don't think Mike was planning to be here today, so I think that's part of the reason why he's even here. Oh, he came to get that.
I came to get some goods, huh?
Get the package.
Nice.
Stuff came in. Well, he's at Vagabond on Wednesday, at Chickies and Pete's on Tuesday. He's actually barely been here the last week.
He's a hard worker.
Yeah, but it's kind of weird for him not to be here.
That's true. This is his home, huh? Is he here more than you, Josh?
It's probably a coin flip between the two of us.
Okay.
Because he gets here earlier in the morning than I do. He nods his head, yes. 609-403-0973. We promised we would do this. The Carson Wentz Would You Rather. So the texter texted in and asked us earlier, where would Wentz rank in your rankings? And Hunter and I agreed that instead of trying to rank quarterbacks, which is at some point you're going to make somebody mad or disagree about something, it would be easier to just do Would You Rather. Because Wentz has been a topic today. The texter brought up the fact of, is Wentz just an average quarterback? Which I think we both agree, Hunter, he's not an average quarterback. So you have some quarterbacks there of Would You Rather when it comes to Wentz.
I have 6 definites I would rather have. Now, it's tough to do this because I mentioned to you off the air, someone like Lamar Jackson. Well, he's having a fantastic season, but his body of work isn't there to really say, what is he? Because, for example, if you watch Carson Wentz in 2017, it's a no-brainer that you would want that guy to build your franchise with, and now you look at him, and it's, well, what was he in 2017?
And I think when it comes to anybody who is in their first, second year in the NFL, you can't put them on this list yet.
Right.
Because we don't have enough of a resume, enough information on them.
So there are 6 quarterbacks, and I understand that Tom Brady's super old. He doesn't have much time left, but you put him in this category. There are 6 quarterbacks that I would rather have automatically, no question about it, over Carson Wentz right now.
So Brady, Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Mahomes, Breeze, and who's the sixth?
I threw Watson in there. I think Deshaun Watson has something about him that I really like.
Okay.
So I have 6 that I believe I would easily take over Carson Wentz right now.
That's interesting. I don't know if I go Watson yet just because of the fact that he, like Wentz, has had some injuries, and I think that they've both at this point missed about the same amount of time. So I think it's kind of it's an either or at this point for me.
Well, if you're thinking that Carson Wentz is in that category, then we still have something to build with this guy, and it's not time to move on from him. But this is when it gets tricky and the questions get asked. Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well, let's go one by one.
Okay.
Okay, so who do you want to go with first?
We'll go with Matt Ryan.
See, I said earlier, to me, Wentz and Matt Ryan are very similar. To me, they're interchangeable at this point. I think that if you put great talent around Wentz, just like with Ryan, you're getting great production. Matt Ryan without Julio Jones and an offensive lineman and a backup running back last night, and he got sacked, 9 times yesterday? So I think him and Wentz are pretty much interchangeable.
Sam Darnold.
I would take Wentz because I think Darnold, he's still behind the curve, and he's still part of that class. We don't really know 100% who they are yet.
I am more intrigued with him, though, than I feel like I ever have been. I feel like he has something there. It's just, can it come out of him?
He does, but I need another 2 years of seeing what he can do.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
I would take Wentz for this reason. I'm not 100% sold that Garoppolo is a game changer because his team has won a lot of games in spite of him. He has not been this great quarterback every game. It's like he's Russell Wilson or anything. He's had interceptions. He's had some bad plays. Whereas that defense playing out of their mind, they have a 3-headed running game. So right now, I think I would take Wentz ahead of Jimmy G.
Jimmy G is doing a very solid job at managing football games.
He's doing a good job in not losing any games.
Right. Now, would you put that in that Alex Smith category of quarterbacks now that we're going back to the average and to the not throwing interceptions thing?
So I would probably say Jimmy G is better than Alex Smith just because I think Garoppolo has better physical ability than Alex Smith.
I'm on the same page. How about Derek Carr?
I would be inclined to go Wentz over Carr just because of the fact that I think we have seen Derek Carr have some, roller coaster games. I think that Gruden is a little frustrated with him at times. We've seen other coordinators. We know he's supremely talented. But sometimes talent, the ability to do something with the ability to process information doesn't always match up. And I think that Wentz at his best is better than Derek Carr at his best.
So pretty much what we're getting at here, and I always wonder this. For example, I'm starting to realize when I analyze Ben Simmons, when I analyze Carson Wentz, and when I look at players in this city, we have glasses on that are clearly biased because we love these players, we love the team, we love the personality, we want them to succeed. But when we are looking at Carson Wentz and we are comparing him to other athletes at that position in this league, if we can't name you more than 6 people that we would rather have instead of him, and I'm trying to think, is this just because we're biased? I don't think it is just because we're biased. I think we're using logical knowledge of the sport and how much we watch the NFL. We're using our understanding of the game as a whole and not just, well, we like this guy because he's an Eagle. We're using logic behind it. If we can't pick more than 6 people that we would definitely rather have Carson Wentz over than him, we have something good here. And it's unbelievable that we rip him apart to the degree that we do.
There are some other names that you didn't mention yet.
Dak.
Okay, so that's one. Dak or Wentz?
So I think Wentz has a better skill set than Dak. I do think, even though yesterday was a little ugly for him, there is something to be said about what he does in the fourth quarter. Like I feel like his team truly believes in Dak to make plays for them. And I don't know, based off of maybe some articles that came out, if the locker room believes in Carson the same way the Cowboys believe in Dak late in games. And I think there's something to be said about that. He has the locker room more than I think Carson Wentz does.
But that may just be a reflection of who's on the team
That's
one
very
year
true.
versus the next. Next year you bring in some new receivers, maybe that whole team is much more bought into Wentz than some of those players are now.
Right, like if Alshon Jeffrey is a bad person, I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying if he is a bad person, well, just because he doesn't like Carson Wentz, it doesn't mean Carson Wentz is the problem. It can be Alshon Jeffrey.
Or it might not even be people who don't like him. Maybe it just be that there's not enough chemistry there. Maybe there's not enough of that intangible. Like, one of the things that made Peyton Manning so incredible with his receivers was it was almost like him, Marvin Harrison, and Reggie Wayne were always on the same page. It felt like they always knew where each other was going, whether on a route, with the football, whatever it may be. I don't see that same type of symmetry with Wentz and Aguilar or Wentz and some of these other guys. I see it with Ertz, but even with Alshon Jeffrey, I'm not 100% sold that him and Wentz have the best chemistry. And part of that maybe because they're both coming off of injuries the last few years. They have enough time to work together. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that chemistry has a lot to do with that.
Definitely. And I do think, though, Dak has more of that it factor later in games. Do you disagree with me when I say that?
I think he does, but I think part of that also is we've seen him in more situations like that. We've seen Dak have to bring his team back in more games than we've seen Wentz. Like, there were a lot of times that 2017 season, the defense was so good and the Eagles were already so far ahead that the Eagles weren't playing from behind in a lot of those games. We haven't seen Wentz in as many situations bringing his team back. I think that has a lot to do with it.
It definitely can, but if I had both games going at 1 o'clock and it's both coming down the wire in the fourth quarter, I have more faith that Dak will go. And maybe that has to do with having Amari Cooper, having Zeke Elliott, having Gallup, having players to actually make plays. Maybe that has something to do with it. I would argue that it does. But my point is right now, I think Wentz, I have more trust and more faith in his ability to play at a skill set level. But when it comes to more of locker room leadership, I lean towards Dak. But if I had to choose, I'm picking Carson because I think skill matters more than something like that in this league.
609-403-0973. Check. Texter asks, what about Jacoby Brissett?
I think Carson Wentz is an obvious pick there, but maybe I'm crazy.
I don't think we have enough resume on Brissett at this point. I think that he played, was a couple games in New England. He came in relief of Luck for a handful of games. What was it, a year ago, a couple years ago, and then we've seen him this year. Until I see a complete season out of Brissett, I'm not 100% sold on him one way or the other. I think he's a solid, good quarterback, but if you ask me push comes to shove right now, I'm going to go Wentz over Brissett. I think Brissett's another one of these guys that has a ceiling, and I think he's closer to that ceiling than Wentz is to his ceiling.
So I guess the last person here would be Goff.
100% over Goff. Goff is the easiest one you asked me because I still believe that Goff is behind Wentz in terms of processing information. There's still a lot of times that McVay is in his ear saying things to him, and you notice that Goff, when he drops back, if he doesn't have his full complement of weapons, he doesn't process the information quickly enough. The offensive line is not blocking well enough. He panics. He makes bad throws.
Time out. We just saw that with Carson Wentz. He didn't have time. His offensive line wasn't there. His weapons are not there, and Carson Wentz struggled. So is that not what we just saw with Carson Wentz as well?
Yes, but I would say that I think Goff is not as able to process information as Wentz is. I think Wentz makes more of the ad-lib play to keep a play going and is able to make that play down the field than Goff is. I think Goff is more dependent on the clean pocket and things going right. I don't think he's as good going off schedule as Wentz is.
That's fair, and I think that's something that this team needs to do. I want to see Doug Peterson draw up some plays where he's moving out of the pocket and he's moving to the right side and throwing on the run because that's what he does well. And you mentioned ad-libbing. When Carson Wentz is about to get sacked and he does the famous duck underneath the sack and finds a way to run for 6 yards or 7 yards, that's the beauty of Carson Wentz. He needs to play more freely, and when he plays that way, he will play a better game all around. It would take less stress off if he just plays the game freely and is able to make it happen instead of sitting in the pocket. I think that's really hurting him. They're forcing him to stick in the pocket, and it's not effective.
One more text at 609-403-0973. I want to get in here. Ryan from Cape May, he says, Wentz is a baby. He's played 2 full seasons. People need to relax. He will develop as he gets healthier and older. Only idiots say Wentz needs to go.
I love this one. Can I just throw this in there real quick?
Sure.
You guys are so biased. Why don't you just say he's the GOAT? He hasn't made anyone around him better. I love that. And I always mention Aaron Rodgers. I just watched him struggle big time in San Francisco. He didn't make anyone
and Los Angeles.
He did not make anyone look better in that game. But if you ask this guy, he'll tell you Aaron Rodgers is unbelievable. He's the GOAT, which, he's not wrong. He is. But you can only do so much.
Yeah, it's not that we're biased to Wentz. He's not the GOAT. It's understanding that a quarterback is only as good as the talent around him. And unless you are the Russell Wilsons, the Drew Breeses, the Tom Bradys, you are not able to do certain things. I don't think Wentz is elite, at least maybe not yet. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Jacoby Brissett and Jared Goff and Derek Carr are that much better than him. I think that a lot of these quarterbacks are all similar at this point. And I think that guys like Matt Ryan, him, are interchangeable. Does that mean that I think Matt Ryan is the GOAT? No. John McMullen joins us every day. Check out all of his work at 97.3 Espn.com. Follow on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL news and notes. John, how was your Thanksgiving?
Very good. How was your Thanksgiving? And Hunter is there as well. I hope you guys had a good time.
I thought I did well.
I had a good day at the office. Can't complain. Had some family over, relaxed, watched the Dallas Cowboys lose. It was a good one.
Yeah, the Dallas Cowboys. A little Jerry Jones cheers instead of wine for your Thanksgiving dinner.
John, I actually wanted to start with, we've been talking, the topic of Carson Wentz came up. And I wanted to ask you about actually similar to what happened last night, the game after the Cowboys game, the Falcons and Saints game. We saw Matt Ryan. He's without his number one receiver, Julio Jones. He's without an offensive lineman. And he got sacked, 9 times last night? And I feel like people don't understand how important it is for a quarterback, no matter who he is, if plays are off schedule or you don't have the talent around you. I think Matt Ryan showed part of the reason why Wentz has not been the 2017 Wentz this year is because part of it is he doesn't have all the weapons around him. Is that a fair assessment to make to compare Matt Ryan's situation to Wentz's?
Yeah, I think it's very fair. Where I would be a little bit concerned, I think at some point, certainly in 2017, when Carson was on his way to being the MVP of this league, I thought there was the assumption by many that he was going to be that next tier, that top tier, whoever you want to put in it. But guys who do elevate some lesser talent around them, think about probably the best example of that would be Aaron Rodgers in his prime. No matter who they threw out there, who would make him look good as a receiver. I think Russell Wilson, to an extent, does it in the fact that, they've been playing the NFL. That's been the whole theme, NFL 100. They've been playing for 100 years. He's the first quarterback that has had a winning record this deep in his career, year after year after year after year. So wins and losses aren't a quarterback stat. You do need talent around you. But I think it's fair to say that Carson hasn't handled some of the adversity as well as could be hoped for. And I think best exemplified in the Seahawks game by all the turnovers. Look, you can't control if J.J. Arcega-Whiteside isn't running the right route, or Greg Ward, or some of these receivers that aren't top tier. What you can control, don't turn the football over, things like that. And if they don't turn the football over, they're in that game. I don't know if they're going to win it, but it's a one-score game. It could go either way. So there's part of what you're saying is right, but I think part of people disappointing is right as well, being disappointed, because if you thought Carson Wentz was a superstar, truly top-tier elite quarterback, he hasn't played like that this season. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, and I think, John, the other thing that stood out to me is, Rodney Harrison mentioned on the broadcast last night, because he played with Drew Brees in San Diego. He said that he loved playing with Drew Brees, thought he was a super hard worker. He was always impressed with him, but he never thought Drew would be what he has become. And I'm in no way saying that Wentz is going to be Drew Brees. But I'm saying that there is some sort of, it's still a little early in the process to label him one thing or another. He still has the chance to develop into more of a player. And I think that gets overlooked sometimes too, that he was drafted in 2016. It's not like he's 10 years into his career yet.
No, definitely has chance to improve. And every time you go out there and every time the minutes and the plays and the snaps and the repetitions pile up, in theory, you see more, you can understand more. It's what Doug Peterson said before the Patriots game about Tom Brady. You can't develop anything defensively that he hasn't seen. So, of course, there's room for improvement. I think what the step back has to be, the recalibration has to be, is people thought he was already there. And that's some people, not all people, obviously, but that part was probably not true. Not probably, definitely not true. He needs personnel around him to be consistently good. And there are quarterbacks who, as I said in the past, very few, though, who elevate the talent around them. And if you were thinking he was that at this stage of his career, he's not. But I don't think that's anything to panic over.
John, let's look a little bit into the practices that have went down this week. So I know Zach Ertz was a hot discussion, but before we get to him, I want to look at Jordan Howard and this stinger issue that occurred. He is still not cleared for contact. So what exactly is going on with Jordan Howard?
Well, a stinger, it's a nerve injury. So basically he has to pass the test where he has the same strength in the shoulder before the injury and after the injury. He hasn't gotten to that point, and that's what the point where the doctors will clear him. He's been practicing in a limited fashion basically since the week after the injury. So it is a little bit frustrating because he's been out there and been able to do certain things, but can't get cleared for contact. And if you can't play, you can't get cleared for contact, you can't play. And it's here we are again on Friday before a game. He's not cleared, so that's pretty good indication he's not going to play again Sunday. So it's going to be Miles Sanders and Jay Ajayi returning to Miami. That's going to be the running game for the Eagles.
Which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing as long as Doug Peterson commits to the run and doesn't forget about it in the second half. But let's look at Zach Ertz because he missed Wednesday and Thursday of practice, and then he was out at least on the field today?
Yeah, well, Thursday, Thanksgiving, it was an estimation because the Eagles didn't practice. They gave the players, coaches off for Thanksgiving, so it was just an estimation. But he was estimated as not practicing on Thanksgiving, didn't practice on Wednesday, and was back. And we'll get the injury report soon, I assume, in a limited fashion. But he expects to play. He didn't talk today, but saw him at the end of the open locker room period, and he said, see you Sunday. So Dallas Goedert said he's going to play. Everybody expects him to play. I think the question with Zach is, how effective is he? Is this going to affect him? Can he play at his normal level? Can he play as much as his normal level? And remember, the Eagles have an open roster spot. They've been kind of holding that. And I think that'll tell you what they think of how much Zach can play, how close he's going to be to normal. If there's any concern, they're going to elevate Josh Perkins from the practice squad. If there's no concern, they're going to probably activate Cre'Von LeBlanc from injured reserve. So that roster move, which will probably come tomorrow, but it could come later today as well, will tell you a lot about how they're feeling about Zach Ertz. But he's definitely going to play.
I wanted to get your thoughts on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside playing the outside. Do you think this is more, do you think the lack of production we got out of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside so far is more about his skill level or the knowledge of the playbook?
The knowledge of the playbook and how he's picked up the offense. And, Dan Orlovsky got a lot of pub locally with his cut-up about the receivers and the routes they were running and kind of fooling Carson Wentz, put that in air quotes, and because they're not where they're supposed to be. And JJ's been one of those guys. And until he gets that part of it down, that was what was keeping him off the field. But I think the Eagles are at the point where I've been for a number of weeks and saying, well, it can't be worse. So throw him in the deep end of the pool and let him swim. And Doug kind of intimated that earlier in the week. It's his job now. He's got to go out there. They drafted him for a reason. And you've seen flashes. I mean, this is a team that hasn't gotten explosive plays in the passing game. And they're not necessarily big plays at big times, and it was garbage time. But the fact is, 29-yard catch, 30-yard catch, that kind of tells you JJ can elevate this group a little bit. But he definitely has to be more refined. But that's every rookie in this league. I mean, and Miles Sanders makes a ton of mistakes as far as not being in the right spot at times. But the Eagles have used him. So I'm a little surprised it's taken them this long to get to this point, but we're finally here, and JJ's going to play.
John McMullen joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles and NFL news and updates. John, another guy who people have a lot of questions about is what is going on the offensive line. Do we expect to see a full all 5 starters on the field Sunday?
Yes, Lane was cleared, so he's ready to go from concussion protocol. Brandon Brooks is going to be back from the anxiety attack. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to clean up a lot because you saw how many issues the Eagles had against the Seahawks on that right side. Andre Dillard just couldn't handle right tackle. And then the dominoes started to fall. Brandon only played one series. You had to put Vaitai in at right guard. Then you had to kick Vaitai in out to right tackle at halftime. And Matt Pryor goes in at right guard. So all those moving parts did not bode well for the Eagles' protection schemes. And that was part of the reason Carson performed poorly as well. And so you go from that to having all-pro. That's the best right side in football when those guys are out there. So that should cure a lot of the ills from a pass protection standpoint, along with the fact that you're playing the Miami Dolphins,
Right.
which is probably the least talented team in the NFL.
Well, that was kind of where I could go next, is that how much of the guys you're going to play versus not play have something to do with the opponent as well? Is there ever a point in time where an NFL team looks at who their opponent is one week and say, we can maybe get by without said player because we're playing said opponent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I asked Doug about the messaging this week because it's such a weird week. Not only do you have the holiday, so you're not in there on Thursday, which you typically is a big practice day in the week, but you're going to South Florida, and it's cold now, so you're going to nice weather. South Florida flu, they call it in pro sports, where guys get down there and have a little bit too much fun. The fact that it's a 1 o'clock game probably helps that aspect of it because you don't want anybody getting into any trouble. That's two. And the third part is the human nature of they see what we see. This team stinks. I think there's no other there's a human nature part of that to have a little bit of a letdown. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles struggled a little bit early because it's tough to take this team seriously. They don't, I often talk about tanking. Coaches and players don't tank. Executives do. And you have to give Brian Flores credit for keeping this team playing. But, man, he's been dealt a losing hand. And it's hard to look at that team and play the Lou Holtz game. If you remember Lou Holtz, when he was at Notre Dame and they were really, really good, he would talk up everybody like they were the 85 Chicago Bears. And that's sort of what you do with the Dolphins. And Doug said it today. They're a really good football team, the Miami Dolphins. Well, no, they're not, and everybody knows they're not. And the players know they're not. So there is, as I said, a natural letdown aspect to it. And you just hope if it does occur, you recover pretty quickly once the live bullets start firing. But it's real.
So there was a rumor going around last week that Alshon Jeffrey was cleared to play but didn't. Now, that can obviously violate a contract if true. So I just want to know, is there any facts around that situation that occurred?
The Eagles thought he was going to play, and then he woke up and had a bit of an issue and indicated he couldn't play. So, a lot of that is semantics. Was he cleared to play? Yeah, he's cleared to play now as well if he wants to fight through the pain. And as I said, the Eagles thought he was going to play last week, as Doug Peterson's comments on the record would lead you to believe, trending in a positive direction. And then he woke up Sunday morning and didn't feel right. So, no, I don't think there's anything as far as, detrimental to the team or anything of that nature. But as far as is the organization disappointed? Were they expecting him? They were expecting him to play. So can they be disappointed at that? I'm sure they could, but I don't think it's going to manifest itself into anything more than that.
Follow him on Twitter at JF McMullen for all your Eagles NFL news and updates. Also, check out all his work at 97.3 ESPN.com. Eagles injury report comes out a little bit later today. Of course, the Eagles are in Miami to play the Dolphins. Hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN.com. John will be all over it. John, appreciate your time and the flexibility today. And one of the questions they brought up is, which Philadelphia star is more of a paradox? And Wentz is in that conversation because Carson Wentz was an MVP candidate in 2017. Since then, the Eagles are 10-11 in his starts, despite Wentz having 37 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and over a 65% completion percentage. So since his injury, he has good stats. 37 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. But the Eagles are 10-11 in his starts. And you look at him versus the other, star players in this city, I feel like every one of this city has team players who are just, they're an enigma. You don't know what to do with them. You don't know what the problem is. You can't put your finger on what is going on with these guys.
I think the easiest answer is Ben Simmons, though, because we see the talent, we see what he can be, and we can't comprehend, as people who are not in the NBA and people who just watch as fans, we can't comprehend having that type of body structure and with that type of knowledge of a game and to not shoot a basketball. It's mind-blowing. The answer is Ben Simmons, and it doesn't even come close because it's so out there. It's so ridiculous. There are so many quarterbacks that have a good season and then struggle 2 seasons in a row. There are no NBA players that are this talented with this type of body who will not shoot a basketball.
So you're saying among Ben Simmons, Carson Wentz, Claude Giroux, Aaron Nola, that Ben Simmons is the most perplexing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It would go in this order: Ben Simmons, Carson Wentz, Joel Embiid, and Claude. I don't think that there's much about Claude, and I kind of brought that up earlier. Claude is what he is. He's on the back end of 30s now, so it's starting to die out a little bit, but he's throughout his prime. There was nothing wrong with Claude Giroux as the player. It was everything constructed around him, the organization thinking they're still in the 70s and 80s, and he was stuck in a really brutal time of Flyers hockey organizationally, and that's why he gets looked down upon.
I would say that if I had to rank the stars of confusion for me, I would actually go Simmons then Embiid.
And that's fair. I don't think that's
because
wrong.
I've seen Wentz at a certain level, so I know he is capable of doing certain things. When Joel Embiid had 0 points the other night, all I could think of was how. Like, I don't care that Marc Gasol is guarding you. Like, when Gasol's not in, it's not like Gasol's playing all 48 minutes, right? Marc Gasol doesn't play an entire basketball game. You're telling me there was no point in time in the game where Gasol wasn't guarding Embiid?
For as bad as Carson Wentz was against Seattle, he threw for 256 yards. I know he turned the ball over 4 times, but that happening, Joel Embiid scoring 0 points, would be equivalent to Carson Wentz
Having
throwing
50 yards.
Yeah, I was going to say 40 yards in a game. He threw 256, and he was awful in that game.
Right. And he still gave you fantasy points.
Yeah,
Like-
but that is similar.
Like I play fantasy basketball, for example, okay? Yeah, I do. I give you that
I
look.
gave you that look. Yeah, I'm anti anything besides fantasy football and baseball. I'm out on fantasy unless it's daily fantasy stuff.
It's actually our upcoming guest. I'm in a league with him.
Oh,
Keith
well
Smith.
now I'm bashing our guest here for
Yeah.
fantasy basketball. I take that
I'm
all
in,
back.
I'm in a league, thanks to Mike Gill. I'm in a league with a bunch of guys who cover the NBA.
Wow, how you doing in the league?
I'm middle of the pack right now.
Okay,
That's
that's
early
fair.
on.
That's fair.
You know, I'm what you would expect. You know, I'm 5 games over 500, whatever it is. It's a matchup thing.
Okay, I got you.
You know, it's like you have X number of categories, and then you have a week, and then you're added to your win-loss record at the end of the week. Kind of almost like a rotisserie baseball setup.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So, but anyway, from fantasy purposes, Wentz is still giving you 14 to 20 points a game, right? Joel Embiid gave you 0 points. That's 0 fantasy points.
Whoa! What do the rebounds get you? He had 16, I believe, in that game. Does that give you any fantasy
Well, it gives you
points?
something, but the points, typically they're more valuable.
We shouldn't base our sports players off
I'm
of their
not,
fantasy
I'm just saying that
points.
there's something to be said for the fact that Wentz is still productive and Embiid wasn't. So Embiid, to me, Ben Simmons and Embiid are both ahead of Wentz. But after Wentz, I actually don't put Claude after Wentz either. I put Aaron Nola after Wentz, and here's why.
I think I left him out of my list, didn't I?
How does a guy go from being a Cy Young candidate to his ERA going up from 2.37 to 3.87? He allowed 10 more home runs last year, 22 more walks, and his hits per 9 innings increased by a 1.5. Like, how do you go from that good to that sloppy in 1 year? Is it just a slump? Is it maybe you were hiding an injury? Like, to me, that's way more, like you said, Giroux is what he is. But Aaron Nola, I don't know what to do with this guy. The year before he was a Cy Young candidate, he couldn't stay healthy. He has an amazing season. Then the next year, he's the roller coaster from your favorite theme park.
I know you don't want to hear this because I think we had this conversation before, but I think the philosophy of the pitching coach was a problem with this team.
Okay.
And you saw it. Well, he got fired. Chris Young did get fired.
Right. There's a new sheriff in town.
Right. And I think his philosophy of the high fastballs and all of that, it didn't work, and it didn't work with Vince Velasquez and Zach Eflin. Once Zach Eflin stopped doing what Chris Young told him to do, he started to be effective again. Now, I'm not blaming this on Chris Young, but I think there's a percentage, whether it's small or large, that went into Aaron Nola struggling a bit. It is weird, though, and you're right. It's weird. It's so strange for him to be so successful 1 year, and then out of last season's total months, I think he had maybe 2 that were good. There was a time where he settled down for about 1.5 or 2 months, but other than that, he was garbage specifically
it was
early
like a 4
on.
or 5 start run that you were like, oh, there he is again.
Right. Yeah, it's something that he needs to figure out, but it's not to the level of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, because I think what the Phillies need is 4 more starters. And if you figure out a way where Aaron Nola is your 2 or 3, that's still very solid. That 3 ERA that you mentioned, what was it, 3.8? Is that what it ended up being, or 3.5? Where were we?
It jumped to 3.87
Okay,
from
3.8.
2.37.
Right, a huge difference. A huge difference. But if Aaron Nola is giving you, say, I'll spitball a number, say he's giving you a 3.3 ERA next season, I don't think you're in a bad spot if he's your 2nd or 3rd starting pitcher.
And the bigger reason why I point out Simmons and Embiid as more paradoxical is also because of their sport. Basketball is only 5 guys on the floor. Basketball is a little bit closer to hockey in that one guy can make that much of a difference. In football, you're so dependent on other stuff around you. In baseball, you're so dependent. Like, Aaron Nola could have 15 strikeouts, but if the third baseman has an error and the guy gets on base, what if there were 5 straight errors? 2 runs can score.
Yeah, but that wouldn't really affect their ERA. So this is what it would be like.
No, but what I'm saying is as a general principle, a team sport is less of a burden I place on the individual player.
Right.
Than a sport like basketball where, look, Tobias Harris can turn the ball over, but doesn't mean that Ben Simmons should stop shooting.
Right, absolutely. I was thinking more along the lines like, say Aaron Nola has a great performance, he strikes out 10, allows 1 homer in the bottom of the 3rd, but the Phillies get 2 hits all night. Well,
right.
He gets a loss, and I know that really wouldn't make his ERA look bad either because he only allowed 1 run, but you're right. There's so much more involved that only he can control so much of it.
Let's get one more text in before we hit the break. 609-403-0973. The texter says, this is the guy who's been asking us a lot of Wentz questions throughout the day, so we appreciate his feedback and listening to us. He says, you mentioned about Wentz having a ceiling. Just a question, what if this is his ceiling? Is that good enough for you guys?
Well, it's not because I've already seen him reach a higher point in this league. So would that not be his ceiling, 2017? Is that not his ceiling?
2017 would be his ceiling, yes.
We know this is not his ceiling. We've seen it. We've actually watched it. If we saw 4 seasons of this out of Carson Wentz, you should be way more disappointed. Believe it or not, he was a big-time reason why the Eagles won a Super Bowl.
With Keith. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Doing well. So I know that before we get to the Sixers, I know you were keeping track of the Celtics Nets game today. I wanted to ask you about that because it looked like after the game there was a lot of pleasantries between Kyrie and his former teammates, all hugging each other. Lots of long conversations, not the LeBron conversation who puts his shirt over his mouth. No, it was a lot of open dialogue going on there.
Yeah, outside of a couple guys in the NBA, there's no real feuds in this league. Everybody is friends. The guys understand. Players leave, they do what's best for them, and the reason they understand it is because they're going to do the exact same thing when it's their turn. So nobody really holds any ill will towards Kyrie from the Celtics side. They're all going to get along with him just fine, and that's how it's going to go. So no real nothing unexpected there, I guess, with guys sharing pleasantries and saying hello after the game because Kyrie wasn't there last game. So that makes sense that today was the day for that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that gets overlooked is that I think that most of the players realize they're actually better off without Kyrie. Kemba is a much better fit in what the Celtics are trying to do over there, and Jason Tatum is having a good year, and Jaylen Brown is having a very good year. So I think when you look at the Celtics, you could argue that it's almost like an addition by subtraction going on, and for a lot of those people, they probably are like, "Hey, Kyrie, thanks for your year here, but we're happy."
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, something I've been saying all along is, in a vacuum, Kyrie Irving's a better player than Kemba Walker. But the reality is fit matters in the NBA, and it matters quite a bit for this Celtics team. They needed a guard who was going to come in, not be ball dominant, was going to be okay with the younger players getting their fair share of shots and things like that. What you're seeing today crop up is how much they miss Gordon Hayward. He was playing at an all-star level when he got hurt. He fractured his left hand, and that's really cost them because they're missing that one guy offensively late in games who can get his own shot or set up teammates. So, but Hayward said this morning he is finally to a point where he feels like he's ahead of schedule. He feels like he's doing really well. He's been able to run. So his conditioning has stayed up. So I think you're going to see it ultimately come down to Hayward getting back here, probably maybe a little ahead of what that timeline was, but right around Christmas. And that's when I think the Celtics will feel pretty good about themselves as they're back as a whole unit once again.
Speaking of fit, I want to switch it over to Sixers because I've been wondering this, Keith, and I don't even know if we have the right answer for this, but I did want to oppose it to you specifically, and that was, we've seen teams that, have added new players to a starting lineup before, take a while to gel and come together. And I'm a little curious, how much do you think the Sixers roller coaster play this year is a byproduct of these guys learning how to play together versus how much are these guys really a fit together?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of learning to play together, partially because you have a lot of guys who want to operate in the same space on the floor because you don't have any true floor spacers. You don't have that J.J. Redick who's going to live around the arc with this team anymore. You're having guys have to play that role, as well as guys like Al Horford and Joel Embiid. They like to operate from the same spot. They both want to be down on the left block. on offense, or they want to be up around the top of the key. And unfortunately, when you've got them both, that's just not something you can really make happen. So you can do it, on occasion, and you can mix and match. And I know they haven't played all that many games together yet. So that's, I think, where the fit issues are coming in a little bit. So we'll see ultimately what this looks like with this team. But right now, these guys are just they're having to figure it out. And unfortunately, in the NBA, you got to figure it out on the fly because there's not a lot of downtime. You don't have a lot of days off to practice and things like that. So I think that's why they're getting caught up a little bit.
We have seen some games now with the Sixers where Brett Brown allows his team to figure it out, if you will. He allows the team to just go out there and play their game, and it seems as if there's not an aggressive amount of structure involved. And I was just curious on your thoughts as a whole on Brett Brown and that philosophy with guys like Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid who seem to need a little bit more structure.
Yeah, I think you're something on that. They don't run a ton of pick and roll, which is basketball's most simple action. You see just about every team run that multiple times a game, and that's just not a staple for them. So they run a lot of sets. They run a lot of stuff that takes 10, 12 seconds on the shot clock to develop, and if that gets shut down, then they're kind of in trouble because outside of Simmons, they don't really have a lot of guys who can create off the bounce. Josh Richardson can do it a little bit, Horford in the right matchups, Harris from the right spots on the floor, and I think that's kind of causing them a little bit of trouble. What they're lacking is that guy that they can really throw to, the Jimmy Butlers of the world, who last year became the guy, when it breaks down, give me the ball, I'll make something out of nothing, and they just don't really have that kind of guy right now.
So I love Ben Simmons. I need to preface this by saying I do love Ben Simmons. I believe in him, and obviously the jump shot is a problem. But I was just curious, do you think that there's any way that he can be effective off the ball if he is going to be unwilling to shoot? I don't know if that's going to work full-time at point guard, but if you take the ball out of his hands, you're taking away what he is so talented at. So the question is, do you think that he can succeed in this league off the ball a lot more than on the ball?
Yeah, it'd take the right kind of guys to be on the floor with him. When he's out there with Embiid and Horford, one of those two guys needs to be operating in and around the basket area. And that's a problem for Simmons because that's where he's best off the ball. That's about the only place the team's going to guard him. They're not going to stretch it out. I mean, I know he made a three-pointer the other night, but no one's running out on him until he starts knocking those down with regularity. So that becomes a challenge for them where they're just going to have to really kind of figure that out and mix and match, because what you don't want to have is when he gives the ball up, now you're playing 4-on-5, and that's a challenge. The place where I think he could figure it out, and this is where a guy like Horford being such a good passer helps, is if he can figure out his cutting lanes and his cutting angles, that'll work. But the challenge is what you see regularly is he'll give the ball up to Horford or even to Harris or Richardson, then he makes a cut, but he's cutting right into Embiid or he's cutting into Horford on the block, and it's just really kind of messing up all the spacing and timing of everything else. So that's something where they've got to really figure that out, because once you get to playoffs, that's all about matchups and schemes. And the minute he gives up the ball, teams are just going to drop a mile away from him and really make them play 4-on-5.
Keith Smith joining us on the World Wakanda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, and follow on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. Keith, I want to ask you also, and this is maybe a little bit too far down the road, but I want to ask you, I know you do a lot of work with salary caps and numbers. We know that teams every year make additions, and what can the Sixers actually do financially to make an addition? Because we know that they signed Simmons to an extension. They re-signed Tobias Harris to a lot of money. Al Horford's costing a lot of money. It doesn't seem like they're going to have a ton of flexibility to make additions.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely any one of the regular starting five is going to be going anywhere. They're all locked into contract. Simmons is next to impossible to trade this year because of the poison pill provision, which means it counts for a lot more money on one side of the trade than the other. Horford just signed there. You don't generally move guys you just signed. They gave up an awful lot for Harris, re-signed him to a big deal. So that's going to be the tricky part. The guy who I think becomes most tradable of that group is maybe Josh Richardson, because he could help a lot of teams, but I think he helps Philly a lot too, especially on his number. So maybe what you're looking at is they could start piling together some of the contracts with some of their bench guys and putting those guys together in deals and moving them off, and those would be the guys that they would send out in a trade. But other than that, there's really not a clean way, because I don't think this is the year that they're going to look at Simmons and Embiid and splitting them up. Maybe that's an off-season thing. If even then, I think that's probably a little doubtful as well. So I think what you really focus on is buyout seasons, and they're going to look to see who gets bought out. What are their needs? Obviously, they're going to need a shooter or two, and see does someone free up that was a little unexpected on the buyout market and make a run at a guy like that. Because then what they can do is they'll just waive one of the end-of-the-bench guys with no real concern and bring in this guy on the buyout market. But a trade, a little tough to see how that would come together, especially anything that's a real move-the-needle type of deal because of just the contracts just aren't there to put together to get there.
Keith, one more before we let you go. As the NBA is entering December, I know that we're starting to get close to that deadline. I think it's December 15th when guys who are signed can then be moved. Is there a prime candidate around the league right now that when that December deadline passes that you foresee might be getting a lot of trade conversation?
What's funny is this is what I do. This is what I talk to people about all the time. And there just isn't. Teams really say it's kind of dead right now. There's the partially what's leading that is the Atlanta Hawks. They're the only team that are under the cap right now. They're really poor free agent class, so no one's really trying to clear space for free agency next year. You've got a lot of teams that feel like they're still in the playoff race where they are or aren't really. It's a little early. So I think this year you might see kind of a muted trade market because of the fact of half the league, more than half the league, switched spots last season as free agents. And when that happens, teams are really loath to say, boy, we blew it with this signing. Let's move on from this guy right away. Even when they probably should, they just don't like to do that because it doesn't send a good message to the rest of the league, to the players, to agents, and things like that. So I think you're going to see a trade market that's a little slow to develop. You're probably going to see more action on the buyout market when guys like Andre Iguodala get let go and things like that. Maybe a team like the Cavs can move some of their veteran guys, but that's going to be a little bit tough too. So you got to start watching who those bad teams are that fall out right around the holidays, because those are the only teams that are very likely to be active this summer or in season before this summer.
Follow him on Twitter at Keith Smith NBA. He usually joins the Sports Bash every Wednesday at 5:15, but we appreciate him maneuvering around and joining us on a Friday on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Keith, hope you have a great weekend. I will catch you next Wednesday.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Keith Smith, always great insights here on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, the Eagles injury report just came out.
Hit me.
Zach Ertz and Jordan Howard are questionable. Everyone is a full go. So Aguilar, Vinny Curry, Alshon, Lane Johnson, Alshon Jeffrey, Jason Peters, everybody's a full go. Ertz and Howard were limited at practice. They are both listed as questionable for the Dolphins game.
I think you're going to see Ertz go, and I think you're going to see Howard not play.
I agree. I was just going to say that. I don't think you see Howard this Sunday.
Now, what if we see Aguilar in the slot? Would that make you feel a little bit better about things?
No, because I want to see Greg Ward in the slot.
I don't want to see Aguilar on the outside at all.
I want to see Aguilar just catching babies instead of footballs. I mean,
listen, if
maybe not, but no, I'm serious though. I want to see Greg Ward in the slot.
I do too,
because I think Greg Ward showed you that he is not just an effective, receiver in that position, but that Wentz trusts him.
I guess my point was I don't want to see Aguilar outside more than I want to see Aguilar in the slot. You know what I'm saying? I just don't want to see him on the outside.
No, I want him on the outside because that way he might get one target the whole game and Greg Ward might get 10.
I don't think so. JJ Arcega-Whiteside.
I think that Wentz is starting to convert into the dump-off guy.
But that's Doug Peterson's fault.
I know. I'm just saying. I think that's where
I don't know if it even is Doug Peterson's fault. That might actually come down to Howie's fault.
Well, I don't know if it's Howie's fault. I mean, he's not coaching the team.
But if there's not talent on the roster, who do you blame?
Well, there's two sides of that. One, I will say that I think the Eagles as a whole, Roseman, the front office, the coaching, I think the whole organization overestimated the depth of talent on this team. Okay? I think that is on one hand. But on the other hand, this offseason saw your head of personnel, your head of scouting, your right hand to Howie, Joe Douglas, leave after the draft. So I'm not 100% sure how much of the roster is Howie versus how much of it is Joe Douglas. So I'm not going to sit here and point the finger at Howie and say, you did this to us. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that because I look at this Eagles team and I feel like there is fingerprints of multiple people on this roster, including Doug Peterson, who has just been over the top in his love for Jason Peters and Darren Sproles. Frankly, I don't think Darren Sproles would have been back this year or Jason Peters if it wasn't for Doug Peterson. So I think there's multiple people responsible for the makeup of this roster.
I might disagree with you on that because at the end of the day, Howie Roseman is in the position of general manager to make the decisions for this football team, right? So he's the one who's in the position to do it. So no matter what, if Doug Peterson wants him or doesn't want him or wants, Jason Peters, Howie Roseman has the authority to say, no, Doug, it's not time to bring them back. He makes the decisions. So he can't just say, okay, Doug, whatever you want. That's flawed on him, and that still goes back on him, whether Doug wants him or not. But he needs to make the grown-up decision and say, this is not the time to bring these guys back.
I will counter with this. Jeffrey Lurie had said that he wanted the front office and the head coach to have full cooperation with each other.
And I think that's right.
He wanted them to go hand in hand.
And I think that's
fair.
And
I think that Howie is less of a dictator than people think he is. And I think that Howie believes and trusts his coach's analysis and perspective on the roster than he may have in the past.
And I don't think that's the wrong way to do it at all. But if Doug and some of the other guys and Howie Roseman are all in the room, someone needs to step up and tell Doug Peterson, this is wrong. And you can do that respectfully.
And
it
you know
doesn't
what?
have to be mad at each other.
Maybe the time is coming for that. Look, Doug is in his fourth year now, right? So he has had Howie and him in now 4 years. Now maybe entering year 5 when Doug says, I want to keep said player, Howie can now turn to him and said, didn't you want Jason Peters and Darren Sproles? Didn't you tell me to go sign Jordan Matthews? I think moving forward, Howie's in a better position to do that than he was before. Because I think before, Howie was trusting his head coach and his talent evaluators, whereas now he can turn to Doug and say, I don't agree with this, or he can turn to a talent evaluator and say, didn't you tell me to draft so-and-so? I'm not comfortable with this pick. I think Howie and Andy Weidel moving forward, I bring in Andy Weidel because he is the new Joe Douglas. You cannot overlook that. He has a major role, him in Howie Roseman's front office, that all of these guys in the front office can now turn around and say, I don't think that's such a good idea. Let's move on.
I don't think you're wrong when you say that now Howie has a background to base information off of. Hey, Doug, this didn't work in the past. But I still don't think Howie's going to do that. I think Howie's still in the mindset of maybe trusting his head coach no matter what, and I think that's flawed. But there is breaking news here, by the way, out of Adam Schefter that I think is very interesting.
What's that?
And the Cardinals' defensive back, Josh Shaw, is suspended for the rest of the season for betting on NFL games. He's betting on the NFL. He plays for the Cardinals. That to me is intriguing. What do you think about that?
Wow.
I know. I mean, this opens up the can of worms of sports betting being legal, and I know that kind of just derailed us here, but I think that that's fascinating.
I'm reading the report right now.
Now, I bet you he's not the only one to do this. Now, to be fair...
Now he says he's currently on injury reserve, so he's actually not even playing right now.
But he is on an NFL roster.
It says a league investigation uncovered no evidence indicating any inside information was used or that any game was compromised. And we know there was any evidence suggesting any awareness by teammates, coaches, or players.
It says here, if you work in the NFL in any capacity, you may not bet on NFL football. So anything, you cannot bet on NFL football.
Well, I think then that's Shaw's fault.
I agree.
If he knew that he shouldn't be doing that, and that's in the league rules and the policies and the bylaws, I think that's on him. It's not on the anything else.
Now, can he get into the Hall of Fame now? No, we're not doing that.
No.
Bad joke.
That's stop.
But here's the thing: if you're this man, Josh Shaw, why don't you just go through a buddy? You know, like, hey man, can you throw? If I played in the NHL and I wanted to bet on an NHL game, I'll text you, Josh. Josh, can you throw $300 on the Flyers tonight? You know what I mean? It's just that simple. Now we don't know the story. Maybe that is what happened. And somehow he got caught.
Well, I think he got caught because it's easy to figure out who's doing what.
Right.
You know, those companies, they ask you for your location, they ask you for your
driver's license,
everything,
yeah,
the whole 9 yards.
It's
so
legit.
I think that probably someone at one of the gambling companies probably saw Josh Shaw's name on the user and then probably reported him. Or maybe someone caught him, you know, using it on NFL grounds or something. Who knows exactly how it was caught, but I think this was him doing it himself. I don't think he was calling a buddy.
Definitely. I mean, that's the easiest way to get caught. Now, I just wonder what this means for other teams and other players.
Well, it's
other leagues.
Well, there's two problems here. The one hand is all these leagues that are getting involved in sponsorships, right? Like, you know, the Sixers have an agreement with a gambling outlet. There's not an advertiser here, so I won't name them. But there are other entities that are partners with the FanDuels and the DraftKings of the world, for example. There are teams that are aligning themselves with gambling outlets. You have leagues aligning themselves with casinos. So, on one hand, they want the money, but on the flip side, they don't want anybody else making the money. So it's a very, very sloppy, dirty situation.
Do you mean the NFL? Like, do you think it's wrong that the NFL does not allow their players or anyone involved to bet? Because I don't think it's wrong.
I don't think it's wrong at all. I think that it's like anything. You never want to compromise anything. You never want the impression of impropriety going on. You never want the impression that something fishy is going on here. The league doesn't say they can't bet on NBA games,
correct,
or anything else.
Correct.
So, you know, to me, I don't think the rule's an issue at all. I just think Josh Shaw's an idiot. And frankly, I'm kind of glad this topic came up because now it's an opportunity for people to realize how serious these professional sports are about not allowing any improper things going on. I think this is a great job by the NFL to say, look, our advertisers are not in bed with our players. You know, our players are not out there trying to manipulate the outcome of games for their own benefit. I think this is a great sign for the entire world to see that the professional sports organizations are not allowing the rise of sports betting to control them.
Now, what if he threw $10 on Dallas? Like, all of this for like a $10 bet on Dallas to win on Thanksgiving.
That's his fault. He's an idiot.
10 to win 7.
Dude, first of all, if you are an NFL player and you're gambling on NFL games, you either need to call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Like Eitan Shander does, or needs to.
I can't speak for Eitan. But what I will say is that I think that you either need to call 1-800-GAMBLER or you need to have a serious sit down with somebody to talk about what are you doing with your spare time. Like, you're an NFL player. You have money. You can do anything with that money. You can bet on other sports. You can go out to the club. You can go out and drink with your buddies. You can do anything you want. Okay, when you have that position, that opportunity, you get to do things that nobody else gets to do. And you decide to do this?
And you can still bet. It's not as if you can't bet. You just can't bet on NFL football.
Right.
So you can bet on college. You can bet on hockey. You can bet on basketball. You can't bet on the NFL. So that's just one thing. And I know it's the most entertaining thing, but come on.
Well, according to you, college basketball is very entertaining.
Well, of course it is. It's 1A, 1B.
Maybe you should be betting on college basketball instead.
I do that too. I'm actually in the middle of one of my bets right now, and it's in overtime. The Rangers and the Bruins. The Rangers were up 2-0 at plus 205. That was an easy no-brainer. And, of course, the Bruins come back. So now I'm sweating it out.
Shout out to Virginia.
That was a big win.
They just beat Vodtech for the first time in 15 meetings.
Wow, I did not know it was that long.
Long-running rivalry, Vodtech, Virginia,
to
Cavaliers
get to
and the
the ACC
Hokies.
championship game.
Yeah, well, they're gonna get killed by Clemson, but it's still a great moment for them. You know, I mean, you beat your rival the first time in 15 years.
Absolutely, and they get a chance. Who knows? Who knows what can happen?
Well, maybe they'll just cover. Who knows? Speaking of the gambling, before we get out of here, because we do have the Flyers.
Speaking of gambling, I took the Flyers.
Okay, well, good for you. Look, I wanted to ask you about the Flyers real quick because we didn't get the chance to talk about the Flyers much at all, and there was so much we wanted to get to. We thank all the texters and all the callers today. We've had a lot of great feedback. We thank everybody who's been involved in the show today, myself and Hunter. It's been a lot of fun. Flyers hockey. Coming up here on 97.3 ESPN. We got about 5 minutes left in the show. I look at this hockey team, and I only have one question. It's not even about the team. It's about what is Chuck Fletcher going to do for the deadline? I feel like he's a dude who likes to make trades. And I'm curious, is there a position on this team that is actually really needing that much of improvement, or is there a player out there that can improve anything on this team?
Do you know what can actually become that piece? And it's already inside the organization.
Morgan Frost?
No, he's actually playing really well. It's Nolan Patrick.
Okay.
He's been out with the migraine issue. It seems like he's starting to skate again. Maybe he's the piece that comes back at the trade deadline time frame and is what we need someone to be. Now, it's funny you mentioned Chuck Fletcher making moves. In the offseason, I hated the Matt Niskanen move and loved the Justin Braun move. It has completely changed for me. Matt Niskanen has been playing phenomenal hockey. We gave up a second and third round pick for Justin Braun, and that is killing me inside. And at the time, I liked it, so I can't even be mad because now I have hindsight right now. But to think we gave up that much for a defenseman that looks that bad right now, I'm just a little underwhelmed with Justin Braun.
Okay. Now, here's I'm going to go back to a theory I brought up last week. And you were kind of in and out of the studio at the time last Saturday. I was telling Billy Schwein, I think the Flyers need to do to Voracek what other teams have done with their expensive players. Find another team with a fat contract and just exchange.
I just don't know who is willing to take that on. Now, I don't disagree with you at all. I don't. But someone like Milan Lucic, I would never in a million years, because I'm just thinking of contract-wise, how much they make or whatever, I would never in a million years make a trade like that because that's not even close to worth it. Because Lucic doesn't provide anything even close to what Voracek can.
Okay, well, let me do this real quick. And I'm asking you because I am not the NHL expert that you are. Like, I feel like if I'm to have a hockey question, I'm asking you more than I ask me, okay? No offense to myself, but I think you know more hockey than I do.
Yeah, like Voracek's contract is so hefty. I just looked up Lucic, who's making $6 million a year, which is terrible for him.
I'm not even thinking about Lucic, okay? I'm going to give you a team, all right? Is there anybody, for example, on the Blackhawks who has a large enough contract that could be swapped for Voracek?
Probably not, because their guys are. They have super young kids that are coming up,
okay.
And then they have Kane.
What about
and
the Sharks?
No, probably not.
The Ducks?
No, they got rid of their guys, like the Corey Perrys of the world, which we should have took a flyer on, may I add. But
okay, Chuck Fletcher used to be the GM of the Wild. What about the Wild?
The Wild have some interesting contracts, and they're stuck in this spot where they are not getting past the first round. But here's the thing. Would the Wild work with Chuck Fletcher after how it went down in Minnesota? Not that it was a hideous departure, but they didn't get to where they needed to be. Now they're going to make some moves with him and help him out. Who knows? I'm just spitballing. Maybe they don't want to even come in contact with Chuck Fletcher.
I'm specifically naming these teams because they're so low in the standings right
I understand.
Now. So, the likelihood of them making a huge run is low. But maybe they're still close enough that they think that a shakeup might be needed.
See, Zach Parise's 35, and he's making about 7.5, but he's got 4 more years on his contract. Would you trade Jake Voracek at his age for Zach Parise at 35 to 40? Probably not,
No.
right? So that wouldn't work. Matt Zuccarello, I mean, he's another one who's on the Wild right now for a cap hit of $6 million.
Zuccarello's a little more interesting than Parise is.
I agree completely. But I just don't know if that is something that will happen.
Okay.
But I like your mindset. I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know what will work because he's getting paid too much money and not producing enough.